Hey guys, Stockaholics, thanks for being here today. Thought I'd make an update on A2 Milk. I know that there's a lot of interest in this company. Recently, the company came out with their fiscal year report, so I thought we'd look through their, at least the highlights in there. I'm not going to go through everything, there's a lot in there. But spoilers, when I looking through there, I didn't notice too many things we didn't already know, right? Number two, give you my thoughts on um, potential buyouts. I know that there's been a lot of conjecture about that recently. We'll take a look at something that many people are focused on, Chinese birth rates. I'll let you know again when I think about that, and maybe add some context to that. Number four, last but not least, I wanted to talk about some behaviors we noticed in terms of cerveza politics in Australia. All right, so quick recap. Some of the things that I think we already knew is that the last year for A2 has been a challenging year for the company. um, there was an issue in the beginning when COVID shenanigans first began. The company increased production, assuming, in my opinion, that there was an increase in the demand for their products like they had seen many, many times in the past. However, that was largely, in retrospect, it was probably largely a stock up period where people were panic buying to purchase the company's goods. The company didn't identify that, they misidentified it, increased production, and flooded the market with various milk products, one of those being infant formula. So, what they found out later in the year, paired with all of those earnings downgrades that we saw with the company, there was too much of this stuff. This thing has this stuff has a certain shelf life, so that they had to solve all of these problems. They had to what they did is they ended up replacing a lot of that, and that cost them a lot of money. It cost them $108 million to replace that stock. Now, it is apparent that at the same time, there's been a lot of changes in the company that that this kind of action is not likely to repeat. Now, it might, but there's new management. There is they've gone through this experience, and they're also making some changes in terms of tracking different some of their goods, right? So um, over time, I thought this chart was interesting. Over time, we've noticed that Australia, New Zealand, yes, this market was actually increasing. So this is a relative portion of. This is it's kind of a disingenuous way to report this, in my opinion, because it makes it look like everything's hunky dory. This blue area has been over the last year shrank dramatically. That is the Australia, New Zealand um, sales, and that's because the Daigou channel has been closed. The Australia has been in a perpetual lockdown. I thought by now, in my opinion, some of that would begin to change. I think there are signs that it's starting to change with some of we'll get into that later. But this is the core to my personal thesis. People can and have different opinions on why they invest in a company, and that is this China label stuff, right? For me, the main thing that attracts me to this company is to see continued growth in this channel. There are four main channels for this company. I see it over the last year. We've seen a lot of criticism because this company relies too much on one channel. They have multiple channels. That is the direct to China sales. That's this China label stuff, which is largely infant formula. Though they have some milk powder products as well. There's the CVEC channel, and then there's Australia, New Zealand, and now there's this additional small market in the United States. Okay, let's move on. What's interesting in here? Okay, so despite all of this, even though it was a lousy year, they've still been cash positive, even though they've had to spend a lot of money on the replacement of aged inventory, right? They actually have 21 more dollars than they had a year ago. Uh, some people thought that maybe by now we would see some material return to shareholders somehow, either through dividend or buybacks. Companies decided that they still want to be a growth company. That is their prerogative, and that's what I actually would like to see. I think that there is still the potential for tremendous growth in this company. It's a unique company, in my opinion, and that's in my opinion, and that's what I like to see. Okay, there has been some acknowledgement from the company itself of what I think a lot of people's bear cases was for this company. And that is over here, they mentioned that they think some of the struggle with this company is through Chinese birth rates. There is an increase in competition from not multi, I don't think that's true, multinational brands, but that's what they're saying here. But more importantly, the Chinese domestic brands. I've looked at some other companies in terms of their sales. A2 is, I could be wrong on this, let me know if I am. I think A2 is the only one that has seen an increase in market share in Chinese infant nutrition over the last year. And there's been a lot of struggle on a lot of different international brands. But there are some Chinese companies that are taking domestic share. Now, I've shared my opinion on this. I still believe that there is a lot of distrust in China among their own brands, and that's just the nature of China, I guess. That maybe that'll change, but that's what I see. And if there is I think that there will always be a market for foreign products, even if there is sufficient supply in the Chinese market to give that product to their local population. Okay, let's look at some of this other stuff. So China label did grow over the last year. That was, again, this is my core belief thesis. But I want to mention that it isn't as like I thought. It's not as optimistic as I was honestly with this. But that still hasn't changed my overall investment case. Now, in the beginning of the year, there was a lot of revenue growth, right? There was that surge in buying that took place with the panic buying with the Cerveza, and then the second half of the last year, so that kind of the sales declined. What I am looking for, this is my core investment case, is to see continued growth half over half in Chinese label. We have not seen that in the last half. So one of the thoughts again that comes to my mind is, was this this growth inflated, or was this growth is that as a result understated? I don't know. But I want to see continued growth. If I don't see continued growth in China label, that's my core investment case. So we'll see, I guess, over the next, I don't know, 6-12 months. And I may, in the future, if this doesn't continue to increase, I may change my stance on this company. I may decide to sell at a loss or at a gain. I don't know what that will look like in a year or 6 months. Okay, there is some good news though with the Chinese label. They're increasing their footprint in different and throughout China, but you can see again that this rate of growth is not increasing at the same rate that it was in the past. All right, where else? What else is interesting in here? And again, as we know, English label getting hammered, but again, that's largely due to lack of customers coming from the Daigao channel. Recently, there's a company that I saw. I don't follow the company closely. I don't own shares in it, but there's a company like called Estee Lauder, and they are seeing a surge in their sales when Chinese customers, Chinese tourists are being able to return to the host countries of this company. Again, this is a bonus case for me in this company. If at some point Australia decides to open their their country, I expect that I'll get more into this when I talk about China and Australia, but I expect this at least a significant portion of this to return, if not continue to grow into the future. There's one more segment, and there's some more challenge here. Where is the United States? Where this is the one segment that I'm not particularly bullish on with this company. Um, uh, that's not because I don't think A2 is a unique product. I don't think that they have brand power. And I also know that the United States is more racially diverse, and there are more populations in the United States that are da- uh, dairy intolerant that could benefit from a product in the United States from this. The main reason I'm not so excited about the USA segment in this company is because I kind of know US dairy, not the ins and outs of every little thing about it, but I know that the market is extremely saturated. So for a foreign company to kind of penetrate this market significantly and be long-term profitable, I don't know. It might be true. It might happen. And again, that's another bull case that can, it's another bonus in this company, I guess, if that happens. And it might, but that's just not something that I am particularly interested in the long term for this company. This is an article from Rask Media. Is this man Lachlan Burr Jensen wrote? Basically, he's trying to explain what happened a week ago when share prices in A2 milk went up 12% during one day. That was because there was an article published by the Australian. Let's see what we'll read that down here. So the Australian newspaper reported this morning that the world's largest food company, Swiss-based Nestle, is interested in potentially acquiring the company. Now, I don't know how the Australian came to this idea. I don't see any evidence to say that this is true or not. What I see is a lot of speculation. I see and I see a lot of swings in share price that aren't necessarily reflective of fundamentals, both on the way up and on the way down in this recent report that we saw. By the way, when this report came out, and there's really not a lot that was materially new in the report, all of these gains are essentially erased over the two trading days, right? But there has been some interest in the company before. This speculation isn't unfounded. It is, in fact, it is a distinct possibility, but it should should still remain that yeah, it is. There's nothing material. There's no evidence to support this, right? Um, I think that it is possibility, but the amount of loss that a lot of shareholders have suffered in the last year or so, I would think that the bid, and this is just my opinion, would have to be pretty high for a takeover to be likely. I think that there's a lot of potential shareholders that would not be happy with, I don't know, a 25 or 50% premium of the current share price. For me personally, I would be very happy with it if I could have an instant gain overnight of 50% on this stock. Great. There's plenty of other places that I can put my capital happily, but I know that there's a lot of investors out there that wouldn't be so happy with that. So this, as it remains, is still very much largely speculation, and I suspect that unless there's a sufficiently high bid, that this is unlikely. There's been a lot of stuff that's been going on in terms of CCP actions in China over the last year. Some of those could be beneficial to A2, and I think there's the potential that the market may be overlooking some of these things. There is also, it is still China. It is still a very unpredictable place. Some of the things that we saw early in the year was, I think, or maybe last year. First of all, I think that a lot of these actions that we've seen from the government, at least in terms of foreign investment, we saw that there were some fines levied against big tech like Alibaba. I think that's kind of where all this started. After that, we basically saw a massive crackdown on the entire, I guess, the financial education industry in China. Basically, like the vast majority of that is just kind of erased from foreign or any investment. It's just the the CCP said that it's no longer going to happen. We've also seen that, which is I think materially positive for this company, that there's been a lot of these reforms may have the potential to benefit A2, and one of those was the change in the birth policy in Chinese, where we went from a two-child policy to a three-child policy, right? And I wouldn't be surprised at some point in the future if that is just altogether taken out. What I know from having studied different societies, whenever they reach post-industrialization, no matter which society it is, whether it be white, black, Asian, any nationality or subdivision thereof, eventually there's a point when the birth rates tend to decline. And that China has been no different. But they've also had policies that have kind of artificially inhibited this to make it even worse. What the demographers and what the government in CCP in China is beginning to notice, that there's going to be a crisis. There's going to be way too many old people in China, and they're going to have to be supported by a much smaller young population. That's going to put them in the future in a very awkward position. So the CCP is doing a lot of things, and I think what's evident with that the education policy and the reversion of the two-child policy, a lot of this is going to be, in my opinion, beneficial for A2 Milk. The same, which is again the part of my core investment case for this company, I still believe that, and we're seeing this on a year-over-year basis, the middle class in China continues to grow. If the middle class has increasing income and that there still is a distrust in local products, maybe that'll change in the future. I don't know. But if that remains, then the chance that there is significant purchases of foreign infant formula product remains likely. And, you know, knowing all of the behaviors, and I don't want to sound racist here, in China, I suspect that a lot of the mistrust in their own people and their own government and their own brands, I think that that's pretty likely to stay in place. But I could definitely be wrong, and we'll see over time. Oh, there's one other thing I want to mention too. As this middle income class grows in China, and what I believe is been taking longer than I thought. What I believe is inevitable is that at some point that you will see borders open in Australia, you'll see borders open in New Zealand. As this middle class grows, you will see increasing travel from the middle class in China. I suspect that some portion of that will restore the Daigao channel. However, that is speculative, I guess, so at this point, but in my opinion, it's probably a little bit, what would be a little bit higher than, it's a little bit higher in probabilities than speculative. I suspect, like I said many times, that when Australian borders open, some portion of that, if not an increase, some portion of that Daigao channel will return. Recently, we've seen some protests in Australia. Before I get in some trouble. I think that these are likely having an effect on the policies in Australia. I mentioned many times that there's cycles in many things. There are political cycles too. They swing both ways. These cerveza shenanigans, in my opinion, are going to have to come to an end. And I think that's what we are beginning to see in Australia. If you're from Australia and you either agree or disagree, I'd be happy to hear it. I don't know. I'm not the Australian expert. I don't live there. I'm sure many of you guys are. So let me know. But I know that there has been some changes that are likely coming. First of all, what you're beginning to notice in Australia, that there is rapid vaccinations taking place. There was a lot of lag in Australia in terms of vaccinations. They were very slow to start. But I guess the supplies are beginning to reach Australia, and that is changing. This is not a sustainable way to live in this country, declared Scott Morrison, Australia's Prime Minister, on August 23rd. He was defending a dramatic shift in the Cerveza 19 strategy. Since the start of the pandemic, Australia has used an approach dubbed COVID-0, which I think, as we're learning, viruses are going to virus. It's in my opinion, unrealistic policy, stamping on outbreaks down to the last case, whatever it takes. From now on, cases will be allowed to rise as long as hospitals can cope with them. The plan is to drop most restrictions once 80% of adults are vaccinated, which looks achievable by the end of the year. Now, maybe Australia is different than where I live in the United States. To me, when I'm looking at this number, this is a very high number. Unless you're going to mandate that vaccines are a requirement, 80% is a very high number. In fact, if what this number suggests into my mind is that not only are you going to be requiring most adults to be vaccinated to achieve this kind of a mandate, you're going to need a significant portion of the child population to also be vaccinated. So, whether that is achievable or not, in my opinion, is actually still somewhat unrealistic. If you guys disagree and if you think that the behaviors in Australia warrant significant differences than the where I live, I'd be happy to hear it. But when I look at these numbers, it still seems unrealistic. But as we know, the pendulum has begun to shift the other way, or at least what I'm observing. These are my observations; they're not necessarily facts. When I would suspect that over time, this number may also change. I guess in summary, not a lot has changed. I think a lot of us that have followed the company pretty closely, there's nothing, nothing that's been unexpected in the annual report. It has met in the last downgrade guidance, and the market, market's gonna do what the market does, whether that is the speculation with takeout or takeover rumors, or whether that's the market selling off, even though all of this information was already available once that earning reports that came out. For me, there are conditions, like I mentioned, that I would consider selling this company, but it's still very much a wait and see game. We have new management in the company. There's a lot of reasons to believe that at some point in the future, hopefully sooner rather than later, the Australia, New Zealand, the Daigou channel has the potential to restore. By the way, I think I mentioned this. There are other companies in different countries that have opened back tourism and they've to Chinese people, and they have seen sales of different types. This not necessarily this product, so that there may be a correlation there. Time will tell. Will that translate to the Daigou returning? I don't know. But again, for me, it's really, I want to see continued growth in the direct China label. That's the core of the investment for this company, for myself. But I would be curious to let you guys to hear your thoughts on all of the things I talked about this video. And I'd also like to know, why are you considered or have invested, or why are you holding, or why have you sold A2? Any of those things, I'd be really happy to hear it.